Hello, everyone. If you've been following along, you know that we have not yet quite touched on the topic of tarot. And I can't think of a better person to invite here today as our special guest than tarot designer and illustrator creator, Ari Wisner. Ari is a talented multimedia artist. He has not only illustrated other oracle decks, but he is also working on his own collection. Currently available is the Trinity Tarot deck and the Transient Light. I can't wait for you guys to meet him. Let's go ahead and join the conversation happening now. I'm your host, Ray Madrano, and welcome to Woo Woo. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. We have Ari Wisner, who is a very talented tarot reader, tarot creator, oracle deck artist extraordinaire. Hi, Ari. How are you?
Hi, Ray. Thank you. Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you. It's
wonderful.
Yeah. Good day.
I'm so glad you could be here because you are one busy man. So busy. And I really wanted to get you earlier, but our schedules just didn't really match up, but I got you nonetheless. And I can thank our good friend Gary Wright over at the College of Psychic Studies for connecting us. And so let's go into that actually. Where are you located?
London.
And that's quite a bit of bandwidth that we're taking up between Los Angeles and London. That's an interesting thing. I'm part of several groups in the UK with our psychic study group, and everybody's messaging while I'm asleep about the WhatsApp appointments and when we're meeting up and all of this stuff. And I'm like, yo, I'm just waking up, man. I'm like, you guys have had a full day over there. So also, thank you so much for being here with it being later over there. And I know sometimes people can feel drained at the end of the day. So it was a real treat that I could get you.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Yeah. So tell us more about yourself. Would you consider yourself a tarot expert? Because I would.
I mean...
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
I guess, yeah, it's become something that I do a lot of work in. I came to tarot relatively late, so I only came to the tarot sort of 2016, 2017. So I don't have decades of experience under my belt, but it's certainly something that has taken a huge chunk of my life since then. Especially after sort of designing tarot decks myself, you dive so deep into it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So is it something that you would say you would necessarily need a whole lot of time experience with it, or is it something that you can just intuitively pick up?
I suppose it just depends on you as a person. I'm the sort of person who likes to learn through doing. So yeah. I didn't really do any courses or anything like that. I just started playing with it, and I learned by reading rather than learning how to read, which works for me. So I think it took me a couple of years to get really comfortable with it, and another year or so before I felt very comfortable reading for strangers, in
yeah. What was your starter deck?
Oh, it was the Rider-Waite-Smith.
That has by far been the universal answer for all of us, that I have guests that I have on the show that either dabble in tarot or work with tarot in their readings. That's really funny. So it's no surprise, I guess.
Yeah, it was funny because when I first bought it, because I bought it for myself, and it seemed like that was a good place to start if someone was learning from what I could tell. But to be honest, I was quite naive to how many different types of decks were out there. I had no idea that there were so many and that I could find other ones that I would connect to better, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost intimidating how many decks exist out there. And we're not only talking, now we have tarot decks. We have one of the bigger ones that's more popular in your neck of the woods is help me with this, it's the Lenormand?
Oh, Lenormand.
Lenormand. Okay, so you're familiar with that then, right? And so you have, angel oracle decks, you have mental health decks. The other day, a friend of mine was talking about a deck that's based on food. So it's like different foods and ingredients and dishes, and that's really fascinating. So in the world of, I would say, or an abundance of tools and resources, how did you find the right ones? Was it just trial and error, spending a lot on different decks and seeing what clicked?
Yeah, so it was just sort of trial and error. I worked with for the first 3 years or so. I worked with the Rider-Waite-Smith only, and then it wasn't until I started creating my first tarot deck in 2020 in the lockdown that I started building a bit of a community on Instagram of other tarot readers. And this was really the first time I started meeting other tarot readers, and that's when I started seeing all these.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I had one friend. I had my best friend, who is also a tarot reader. But apart from her, it wasn't something that I shared online. It wasn't something that I made friends with, or so. I did that while I was creating the tarot deck, which was kind of nice because it meant that first deck I wasn't really looking at anything for inspiration apart from my knowledge of the Rider-Waite-Smith.
So your first deck, would that be the Trinity Tarot deck that you have? Okay. You have multiple decks, correct? You have the Transient Light deck, which is just stunning. So then I went to your website and I saw that you had that other deck, and then you also have a deck that you collaborated with Kyle Gray as an illustrator, correct? Yeah. So, I mean, I'll gladly get all three, but what's the difference between the three? And can you give us some light on that?
Yeah, sure.
Pun intended.
Yeah. So the first one, Trinity Tarot, is what I was looking for. So after working and learning on the Rider-Waite-Smith, one thing that made me want to create it was that I wanted a modern minimalist tarot deck, which was genderless, which wasn't specific to one kind of culture, and because I hadn't really seen many decks like that. As I said, I hadn't really looked at other artists' interpretations. And it was also a time where I was doing a lot of processing around my spirituality, in particular, my understanding of what divinity is, hence the name Trinity Tarot. So for me, it was about simplifying, modernizing, making it accessible, and also moving the power to the user of the deck rather than external power, if that makes sense. So this might be controversial, I don't know, to say as a tarot artist that.
Well, I am into it. Let's get controversial here. Because
I like to believe that the magic is in you, not in the cards. Of course, there's a certain level of magic because when an artist births a tarot deck, of course, it's rich with magic that they have and intentions that they've put into it. But the real magic is how you interact with it and the person who's using it. And how I saw Trinity Tarot was a way of stripping the tarot back, keeping it symbol rich, but stripping it back to say the power is with you. And Trinity, the idea of the Trinity is you have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the idea is that this third one is the divinity in all creation. So it was kind of like a reclaiming of power that, wait a minute, the divinity is already in you. The divinity is in the person you're communicating with. So it was kind of an empowerment deck.
I love that. I love that. You know what? And that suits my philosophy because when I look at the Trinity, we're looking at all sorts of different things here. But at the end of the day, it's a number, right? It's 3. And a lot of angel frequencies tend to come in numbers and repetitive patterns and so on and so forth. But, you know, even when I was working on my own content that I'm about to start releasing on YouTube, it's all based on the power within. And I work a lot with crystals, and it's like the crystals are a mirror. You know, they magnify or amplify what you're already kind of there. I mean, yeah, they can have outside, you know, they could absorb, you know, things coming in from the outside and whatever. But at the end of the day, you are the magic. That's what I say. And it sounds so cheesy and cliche, but and even with manifestation practices and meditation, it's all like the foundation and the energy is you. you know? So I vibe with that so much. That's so beautiful.
100%. And that's why I get so passionate about tarot. And because it's such an empowering tool. It is about you. And it's always nice when someone comes to you with the opposite view, that as a reader, you're somehow going to impart some like crazy wisdom,
Yeah.
or bring magic into their life.
Super mystic. Yeah. The skies are going to open up and the curtains are going to catch on fire.
And then they're shocked to find out that through the reading, I've just made them realize they already have the answers. They've already got the power. And, you know, it's really, as a reader, I'm a facilitator rather than someone who's imparting. Like, obviously, there is a level of giving messages and interpreting messages from the cards, but the bulk of it is them digging into their own wisdom. So that was kind of and that was also when I was deep diving the tarot to understand it so that I could interpret it visually.
I mean, what else did you have to do in 2020? You know,
exactly.
Deep dive galore.
Yeah, I mean, I knew I wanted to make a tarot deck because being a visual artist, like many artists before, tarot is like a perfect project for any visual artist, because it's like, well, here's 78 archetypes of the human experience. Like, it's a brilliant challenge for any visual artist.
Yeah.
So it was always something that I thought, oh, I'd like to do that one day. And then when the lockdown came, it was like, let's get started.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I'm looking at your aesthetic too. So I follow you on Instagram and TikTok now, and I love your vibe. And your most recent deck, the Transient Light deck, which I really must have in my collection, the first time that I did a visualization meditation where I was focusing on my chakra energy, my energy points in my body, the guided meditation that I was listening to was saying that my third eye chakra was like a violet lavender kind of a, you know, maybe indigo type of color. And when I saw it, and this is how I knew what I was seeing in my mind's eye was correct to my frequency and my energy. But when I saw it, it was like this intense indigo, navy blue with golden. I mean, it was like colors I'd never seen before that were all kind of layered inside of one another. And it just felt like it exploded open. And then I had this profound experience. But when I see your deck, I see a lot of navy and I see golden tones. And it reminds me of what I experienced when I saw my third eye chakra open. And so that's like, ever since I've seen it, I'm like, I need this deck. It's so beautiful. And it's minimalistic. Would you describe your art style as minimal or minimalist?
Yeah, I guess I would. And that's something that's relatively new. Like, when I was younger, I was all about detail. I think when I was younger, I was very conscious of impressing people with artwork or making something that was more sellable. So it was very much about, trying to impress with like detail or with like intensity.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until I took a break from painting for like, I guess maybe like 6-7 years. And then I started again shortly before lockdown and during lockdown painting. And because it wasn't for anybody else, I found that my style was very minimal. I was just painting circles, gold circles, purple circles, blue circles. And it was like, it doesn't matter if anyone likes it or if anyone's impressed by my skill.
Yeah.
I always paint a circle because it's powerful to me. And actually that is what people connect with more. Like, when I do that kind of minimal thing that has more honesty, people do connect with it better. So
that's a wonderful way to put it, actually, because the other day I was conversing with a friend of mine and we were talking about how there are so many tarot decks out there, or oracle card decks, and how they are so, some of them are so detailed. You know, like you'll see, you know, somebody holding a chalice and you see the reflection of the water, but then behind her reflection, there's like a little hand reaching out, you know, something obscure and odd that's always kind of thrown in. And my hat's off to the artists who have visualized this story in, you know, and what they're confined to tell. But it can be daunting to interpret it. And especially as somebody I used to try to practice and read tarot before I was tapping into my psychic, intuitive, and mediumistic gifts Now that I've done that, I'm a better card reader, and I've been able, not so much that I would consider myself a card reader. I do offer, sessions with cards exclusively, but more so I use them when I'm reading to help me put the pieces of the puzzle together. Because I have so many different antennas going off with information, the cards just help pull everything in beautifully and help me relay a deeper message. So when I would get a deck, I would see 50% of the cards that I could read, interpret, and vibe with. And then there would be another 50% that were just so out there. And I'm like, what do you mean? And constantly going to the book and trying to figure out what the book says. Would you say that your deck is definitely like visual, or does it have to be studied? Like, where does your deck kind of fall into that?
I like to think that the card can speak for itself and that you wouldn't have to get the guidebook out. I think, although it's more minimal and I don't go for loads and loads of detail, I do try to still keep it quite rich with symbols, because you can have that richness of symbols without it being busy or too intense or too layered. And it is distracting and daunting if there's too many details, and how all the symbols interact with each other. You're like, oh, does that mean this or does it mean that? Whereas you just take a simple symbol like a key.
Yeah.
Suddenly you've got a lot more to play with intuitively and to react to.
I would also like to clarify, when I say difficult or daunting, I simply mean that I overthink everything. It's not that I want to complicate stuff, but by nature, I complicate the hell out of the most simple things. So when things are simple, it's mostly to quiet my ego and allow the ego to step aside and to perceive the message. So I really appreciate that. But I mean, don't get me wrong. There are people out there that can totally interpret really intricate work in the cards. I'm not one of those people.
I feel that, sure. Like, I bought a new deck recently, which is just so delicious and beautiful, called the Ritual Tarot, and it's a collage deck. And the reason I love it is because it has so much in it, and it can be daunting because like a card will have just so much.
Who is it by? Can you say? Can we take a peek?
I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but Tierra May.
Oh.
But they're all handmade collages. So she didn't do it digitally. She hand cut these out and composed them. So it took her quite a few years.
That's really cool.
They're very, very intense. And I do love reading with it, but it does have that level of, I overthink it. And I'm like, oh, what is that? Oh, there's this and there's that and there's a daisy and there's but there's a time and place for that. And I know some really great tarot readers who have that uncanny talent to be able to overlook all the detail. You can have a really intense card and they glance at it and they're like, and they can word it really concisely and haven't overthought all the fine details of the card, which I think is a great thing to aim for, to be able to do that. I suppose that's the intuitive side rather than trying
I've seen people do readings where the cards don't even have numbers, or they won't even have a name, like, the sun or the world or any, the fool, nothing like that. It's just an image. And I think, wow, I mean, that kind of rides to me like in the realm of reading bones. Have you seen people that like shake the bones and then they divine off of the bones, or runes or sigils, different things? So it's really, you can pull a meaning off of anything, probably even just numbers themselves. You can take flashcards and put a number on it and assign a meaning to the number, and this just divine what you're feeling is. Did I say that right? Yeah. Divine meaning. You could read what your feeling or intuition is telling you about that.
A lovely story to tell. You just reminded me of. It's not my story, so it's something that. So this creator of this app called Moonlight, which is an online platform for tarot reading, where you can do virtual readings with a virtual deck, but also have the camera and the eye contact and so on. But she was explaining to me one of the techniques she uses to help people understand how the tarot works. Mm-hmm. And what she does is she'll talk to someone and she'll say, if they've got a handbag or bag, let's take some items out of your bag. And so each item that they pull out of their handbag, she asks them about it, like a story about it. And then they summarize the story or the wisdom from that item. And then they put all the items back in the handbag. And then she says, right, dip your hand in, the first thing that you touch, pull it out and apply that story to your life right now. And I just thought that was so powerful, the idea that you could divine with anything. And that's what tarot is. It's this huge array of stories or symbols or archetypes that sparks a thought or a memory or an idea, and you intuitively can read it into something that's useful right now.
Yeah.
I just love that she did that. When she told me, I was like, I will be telling everybody your story. I will tell you. I thought it was really clever. And I think that helps sort of understand how the tarot works.
Not that we're promoting, but for my own selfish reasons, this app that you're talking about, is it like a Zoom app but specified more for us, I guess?
Yeah, so it's like a tarot Zoom. So you can have face-to-face reading, you can have more than one person in the room, and then there's a virtual deck. And it also means that the person that you're reading can select the card, for example. You know, when you do online readings, it's really hard to be like, oh, pick a card.
Yeah, split the deck.
You know, I do things like pick a number and you count or whatever. So it's a really good way of like having the deck all clear and it's easy to manage, and you have the face-to-face, visuals. So it's a brilliant free platform that she's created.
Wow.
So yeah, definitely.
I can't wait to look into that.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, definitely.
So do you feel like when you're reading, do other messages come in? Like, is divination, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Would you consider yourself psychic or a medium or, what category? And I know we hate labels in this day and age, but where would that fit in that a lot of listeners could understand where your gifts lie?
Mm-hmm. I prefer to refer to myself as an intuitive reader.
Okay.
I think, so I have a huge fear of being dogmatic about anything. So I don't like the idea of defining or trying to define psychic abilities in myself anyway, or mediumship abilities. One, because I do not know, like I don't always know how it works or why it works or why my reading works or how the messages are coming. I do know I have an intuition, so I feel comfortable saying I'm an intuitive reader, but I do not, I don't know. I don't like to worry too much about how it works, the person that I'm facilitating.
I only asked that question not to put you on the spot, but because there are some listeners that find this show and they don't quite understand, like, oh, he's psychic. Well, then he must be a mind reader. Well, no, that's just or he's intuitive. He must know the future, or lottery numbers, or some people assume that if you're intuitive, you can talk to spirits and commune with spirits and so on and so forth. And though I feel like there's a fair amount of information happening, I always like to compare it to like a stream and you're fishing. And regardless of what your rod and your reel and your bait look like, if you catch a fish, that fish is individual from other fish. And, it might be a different breed or species. And that's kind of how information works when we reach into the ether, when we reach into the astral, or wherever we're getting this information from. We know that it's not from a book in front of us. It's like it's somewhere else that we're pulling it in. And so I just like to ask everybody kind of to let the listeners know how they receive the information and where they think it's coming from, because who really knows at the end of the day?
I always like to do that disclaimer when I'm reading for someone new is to sort of state, as far as as I know, I'm not going to be channeling any spirits. I'm not going to be reading your mind, because I think that's important for them. Because also part of the process of empowering the person you're reading is knowing what's going to be useful. So I don't always communicate all the information or messages that I see in the cards because it's not always useful.
Yeah.
You know, so if I'm getting a certain message from a card and it's a bit uncomfortable, I will only verbalize it if later in the conversation it feels like
Comes
it's
up again, or
or if it's something that's going to be useful, because I want it to be useful for them, and there's no point in inciting fear for the sake of just relaying anything that comes through for me. You know, so I do gatekeep as well, like what I'm reading from the card, and try to like do what's useful to them, because I don't feel that mind reading or predictions are always useful.
yes, and I would like to kind of tap into that disclaimer that I saw on your website that I thought was kind of interesting. You are one of the first professionals that I've come across, and I'm sure there are many that do it, and I've just never noticed. It says you do not give advice, and and I thought that was interesting because I was like, well, wouldn't most people come to us for advice or for a consultation? Can you explain more of what that means? Like, you don't give advice, so you just you present the photo or the image for them, and they take away what they need to take away. Would you say?
So legally, I do have to put down that I don't give, as a professional. I'm not a doctor. You know, I'm not a medical or psychiatric professional in any of those forms, so I can't legally claim to give advice, like official advice. But I will discuss with a client ideas for moving forward, or how they could work with something, or how they could approach something. So I guess I have discussions about those things, rather than say, right, you need to do this or you need to do that. Like, as I said, with the whole predictions aren't always useful. Perhaps a prediction has come up for me, and rather than saying, okay, I feel like this is going to happen to you, you know, you better feel scared, I'll be like, let's think, you know, I would ask the question, do you feel like you're ready for this? Or are you afraid of XYZ happening? To try and lead a conversation to sort of cover the ground that the cards are calling to be touched on, without being specific and making predictions that I cannot guarantee are accurate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think it's that's how I see it, because there is a level of mentoring or guidance that comes with the tarot, but it has to come from them. You know, I'm not going to say you've got to be slow right now. You've got to slow down, but I will help them to discuss their speed at which they're doing things, because I really truly believe that the wisdom is already within a person, and I'm just trying to facilitate that channel and that understanding. So
Absolutely.
no, dogmatic advice I don't give.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for explaining that and putting that out there, because Hollywood has done its fair share of damage to what people think we are or what people think we do. And I know I'm generalizing us. I just mean people that work in the metaphysical field or perform or offer services, either for consultation or coaching or entertainment or anything of the like. Hollywood has sensationalized what psychic mediums are, and Gary, he hates the word channeling. He said, "Oh, that's very American of you." But channeling or reading or cards or messages, even, I can't tell you how many times I've been in card workshops and the tower comes up, and some novice is just, and I don't mean this in like, we were all there, but they're like, oh my God, like, you've got the tower, like your world is about to come. And one of my favorite decks that I work with, I don't know if I have it handy, it's the Light Seers deck. Yeah, it's one of the few that's spoken to me. Like I said, I'm a deck collector. I probably have about 28 decks right now, and out of the many that I have, very few have just, where I get at least like a full connection with the whole deck. So that's why I feel really good about yours, because I can already tell. But yeah, I really like the Light Seers deck. that Tower card for me is one of the most beautiful cards in the deck. And it could be a little bit intimidating, but then you look at the Rider-Waite-Smith deck and it's like lightning and thunder and fire and the whole thing, people are falling out of the building. So, that's kind of the funny thing, is that not every message has to be, an existential crisis with the devil or with the Tower. Would you say that you gravitate more towards tarot when you're working, or do you use oracle cards as well?
Definitely tarot. In fact, I don't. I'm not even going to say rarely. I have worked with oracle cards on a personal level for myself. I've never used oracle cards when reading someone else.
Okay.
I don't really know why. I just don't feel as comfortable with it. I think, and maybe I'm being too safe. But what I like about the tarot is I love its structure. I love that you have the major and the minor.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, the structure seems to be maybe what you value.
Yeah, I find with oracle decks, I don't get that full, circle fullness. And you've got all 4 elements in the tarot, and I just feel like it's got that full spectrum. And oracle decks are a bit more focused on the theme that the artist is working on, or the writer. So I find that quite useful. Oracle decks, like working for myself. But yeah, I definitely prefer the tarot.
Yeah. And I see some lovely artwork on your body. Do you design most of your own tattoos? If not all? Or any?
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, so being an artist, I also appreciate that for a tattoo artist, they need to have power as well. Like, they need to have that say. So I don't go in with a design. I think I've only done that once, when they literally traced the design that I gave them. Apart from that, it's always like a collaboration. So, for example, I want this key, I want the phoenix, in the handle. I want it to have a feather. I want it to have a bead that looks like this. But then they created it. So yeah, they were all ones that I sort of commissioned a certain way. 2 of them are quite clearly dedicated to the transient light, which is my hourglass and my skull, and I've got one for the Trinity Tarot, which is my eye.
Nice.
Yeah, and the key is kind of like an early one for the oracle deck that I'm working on. So it's kind of the early roots of the oracle deck. But yeah, I've even done some of them myself. Some of the stick and poke.
That's really cool. Yeah. Do you ever include some of, well, I guess you just answered my question. Yeah, there's some of the imagery might show up in your decks, and vice versa, they might show up on your body.
Yeah, I guess so. Like personal symbols. So if you look through the transient light, for example, well, both that and the Trinity Tarot, you will see eyes everywhere. And I have eyes. Eyes, circles, keys. Yeah, they're symbols that I have on me. Loads of 3s. I've got lots of 3 tattoos of 3.
Yeah, you vibe with the 3s too. That's funny. Yeah. What are you working on now? You kind of teased an oracle deck. Can you share with us what you're working on?
So it's evolved quite a lot since I first started it. I first started thinking about it and laying symbols and visuals down before I'd started making tarot. And it's taking me the longest. My tarot decks took maybe 6, 7, 8 months each, whereas the oracle deck I've been working on for, properly working on for over a year, and there's still plenty to do. I kind of see it as the third part of my own trilogy, Trinity. Trinity Tarot being that center core.
Yeah.
Transient Light being that merging of divinity and humanity. The whole, eternity being trapped within. Trapped is the wrong word.
Encapsulated.
Embodied in a transient vessel. And this oracle deck, which breaks out of that tarot structure, is the divinity within myself, or the divinity within the reader. And that really is going to break out of all of that. So both my tarot decks are very limited in color palette, very, very limited to 4 colors. Whereas the oracle deck is full color.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, so
I
full
love
color,
that.
painfully, handwriting. I'm just completely being free with it, and it's going to be broken into 3 sections. um, I seek cards for how you approach and journey. I am cards, which are like affirmation cards for the present, and I can cards, which are sort of empowerments of what I can do going forward. So it's the past, present, and future.
Wow.
So it's like the third step of these 3 decks that I'm making. Well, 2 of which I've made. So I'm very excited about it, but it's got a little while. It's got a little while.
Oh my gosh. Well, and if you're the illustrator, do you have an editor? Like, how do you know when to stop? As a fellow artist, I have the hardest time stepping away unless I have a deadline or something. What's your parameters for knowing when to stop on each card?
So I don't have an editor. Both my tarot decks I created and self-published before I took them to a publisher. So it was completely solo project. Whereas I am working with a publisher on the Algo deck, but I'm still working sort of alone on it. Like I get feedback, but I'm very much I want it to have the same process as my tarot decks. So I will do it how I like. And
good for you. That's wonderful.
I to be honest, I don't get too hung up. Like when I have a visual and I make it, I don't often return to it. I might come back to it and refine its like slight visual, like technical visual parts of it. But often once I've done the first version of it, it won't change much. And I think that's because like the most instinctive act of creation is the more powerful.
Yeah.
So I'm quite strict on that. I don't know what else to say with that. Like it really is like I'll go with the first visual. And I'll stick with that unless like no one's connecting with it. But in general, I don't usually get an awful lot of feedback.
That's really cool. Well, and that's really cool, and that you must have a fair amount of discipline to be able to just know, and maybe it's intuition. You know when it's right, and that's beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing all of that. So, I mean, everybody now at this point has probably fallen in love with you, and they are probably thinking about finding you for services. We can find you on your website, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's ariwisner.com or .uk?
.com.
.com. And I will include all of that and the link. Do you prefer TikTok, Instagram, all of them, none of them?
I am more active on Instagram for sure. I do quite regular lives on TikTok rather than Instagram, where I do like free readings for people. But in general, Instagram is where I spend most of my time.
Very cool. And if we want to find your deck, we can shop on your store on your website?
Yeah, sure. You can get them you can get them there or Amazon or your preferred bookshop. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Before you go, I have to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how woo are you? Where do you fall on the woo scale?
Oh, it's a good question. So I think I'm a 6.
Nice. Wow.
I think I'm a 6.
Okay, so you're fairly grounded then.
Yeah, I think as I said earlier, I've got a real fear of being dogmatic. So although I'm very spiritual and I'm very open and will try anything, I always have quite a grounded, logical head screwed on at the same time. I'd say 6.
That's delightful. And can you leave any imparting words of wisdom for our listeners who are finding this and finding you?
Just a general universal wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Anything you've learned recently or maybe 10 years ago that you think would be pivotal for them to know?
I think as a human, I'm assuming it's humans listening.
You never know.
I'm addressing people's cats and dogs. As a human, you are a spark or a slice of the universe. You're literally from the same place as all of nature around you, all other life around you. which makes you just as divine as the next person, just as divine as the sun, just as divine as the animals, whatever. So with that in mind, like, you're in a transient body, your spirit is eternal and divine. And if you don't like those words because it's too spiritual for you, just focus on the preciousness of that, the preciousness that you have a conscience and your feelings, and you have the ability to be unified and connect with other people. I think that is such an energizing thing to focus on in life. Energizing, and it inspires courage, and creativity and connection and love. And there's my woo-woo message.
Yes, it should be celebrated. That's exactly wonderful.
Which comes to authenticity and letting that unique slice of the divinity within you to express.
Yes. And if it's one thing I can tell about you, is that you are authentic. And that's just, celebrate that in yourself too, because we're all celebrating that with you. And thank you so much for being here. To find out more about today's guest, check out the comment box below and let me know what you think. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please like, subscribe, consider a follow, and tell your friends who are into the woo all about it. Until next time, Woo family.